kind of. And I'm short. And I have a story for you, too. So it was 1974, and it had taken me a couple of years after college to save up enough money to go bumming around Europe as I wanted to. By that time, none of my friends were available to go with me, but there was just no way I was going to miss this. I knew this was the time in my life that I could do this. So even though it was a little unusual for a young woman to go traveling alone at that point, I just headed off and went traveling around Europe. And my solution was that I would find other people in the youth hostels or the cheap hotels that we stayed at who were going the same way that I was going, and we'd travel together. Sometimes I traveled alone, but when I wanted to go to Morocco, I knew I could not travel alone. So I hung out in Spain till I found this guy, Roger, who he wanted to travel with me because I was fairly fluent in French at that point, and he didn't know a word of it. So, I was his translator, he was my protection. We pretended we were brother and sister. And we went to Fez, to the Casbah, to Marrakesh, and we're in Casablanca, and in the main plaza there's the snake charmer sitting there with his basket and his snake and his flute and his turban. And I'm feeling a little dubious about this. And I knew that there was no way I was buying water from the guy with his animal sack full of animal skin filled with water in a tin cup that who knows how many people had taken a drink from. And so we're like, a little dubious here. And this guy comes up to us, and he looks like a local, but he speaks like an American. Turns out he'd gone to college in California. And he says, this stuff is just for the tourists. You don't want to be around here. Well, I knew that I liked being in the places where tourists didn't go. And I asked him where we should go. He says, go down to El Jadida. It's a popular place for Moroccans to take vacations. So my brother Roger and I get on a bus, head to El Jadida. By this time, Roger's having a little tourista problem. And we go into a very modest cafe, and I'm trying to ask the woman there to make some scrambled eggs and toast and tea, but she doesn't speak a word French, and I don't speak a word of Arabic. So this young guy comes over, and he speaks both French and Arabic and translates for us. And I explained to him that Roger, my brother, has an upset stomach, and he says, wait here. My aunt will fix him a tea that will cure him of it. And sure enough, he runs off, comes back about 10 minutes later with a big mug of tea and hands it to Roger, and he goes, you drink it. I said, okay, I'll taste it. And he says, what is it like? I said, well, it tastes kind of green and earthy. I think it's fine. So he drinks it down, and Ahmed, the fellow, hangs out with us. And he tells us that there's a Bedouin encampment at the edge of town, and he's going to go visit them because some of his father's people were Bedouin. And so, this sounds great. We go with him, and there are these enormous tents, black wool tents, really big, hold 60 people or more. And we go inside, and the floor is covered with these beautiful carpets, and the men are sitting around on beanbags. And what Ahmed translated and explained to us was they were there trying to drum up support from the other people in Morocco because they didn't want the European companies drilling for oil in the lands that they lived on. So they said, they invited us to come back for dinner later. Oh, I forgot a part. The Bedouins are particularly famous for their hospitality because if you are out in the desert and somebody comes to you and asks for hospitality, to deny it might be causing their death. So they're particularly gracious. And so we're sitting there. I was a heavy smoker at the time, and I asked them if it was okay for me to smoke, and they said yes. They got me a little ashtray, and I realized that, I can't just light up without offering. So I passed my, pack of cigarettes around, and I noticed they're taking them, but they're not lighting up. And after a little while, I realized they're all passing the cigarettes over to one guy, who I figure, he must have been the chief. So they invite us to come back for dinner. We go back into the town center, and there are all these women wearing their jalabas, the robes, and the habib, the scarf, and veils. And I said, I've always wondered what it's like to wear clothes like that. So Ahmed says, well, come back to my house. My sister will loan you her clothes. So we do that, and then we're back out on the street again. And I had this funny feeling. It's well, I could kind of understand why they like this. You feel like you're in a tent, like you're protected. It's cool in here. And but not too long afterwards, I realized that there are people whispering and pointing at me and snickering, and I'm like, Ahmed, what's going on? And he says, they know you're not a Moroccan woman. I said, how do they know? Well, your sneakers, and and you're walking in between me and Roger. A Moroccan woman would be walking behind. I thought, oh, okay, well, maybe I don't fit in so well here. So then we go back to, now I go back to my usual street clothes, my jeans and T-shirt, and we go back to have dinner with them. Now there are remember those giant hammered tin tables that would be set up on little, like big trays set up on little stands. And in the center, there's a big ceramic bowl full of food, and the men are all sitting around on beanbags or on the floor. Of course, the women are only serving. A woman came over with a bowl and a pitcher for me to wash my hands. But in keeping with the Bedouin hospitality, the chief had his 10-year-old daughter sitting beside me, teaching me how to tear off a piece of the bread and use it to grab some food from the big pot in the center. After the dinner was done, we're back lying around on the beanbags again, drinking sweet tea, and there's one wizened-looking old guy off on the edge. You could hardly see him inside his robes and his turban. And he calls out something, and there's a murmur, and Ahmed, what's going on? And he says, you look very strong. Now, I really don't know what came over me, but I challenged Ahmed to arm wrestle. And we're lying, facing each other on our stomachs, hands up, and I held him off for a couple of minutes, and of course, he got my arm down, and the old guy yells out again, and everybody starts laughing. Ahmed, what'd he say? He wants to buy you for 250 camels. 250 camels. That's a lot of camels. That's a lot of chattel. So they were laughing, so I laughed along with them, but I knew it was time to get out of there. So as we headed back to Spain, I realized how lucky I was to be an American woman who could walk alongside a guy, who could wear what she wanted to wear, who could travel on her own. And when I think about it today and about the fact that there are still women who are bought and sold and women who die so that they can take off that scarf. I know I'll never live this down. But it is a true story. I have the letter that I wrote to my mother to prove it. Our next storyteller is Marv Conan. And when I first spoke to Marv, he told me it was going to be a story about a journey not taken. But as his story took shape and evolved, it became apparent that it was just a different journey than he had expected. Please welcome Marv Conan.
It's tough to go after 250 camels, I'll say. Yes, okay. It's 1966. I dropped out of graduate school and was looking for a job. Got a job offer in the mail one day for a job I really wanted, but in the same mail delivery, I got my draft notice. Instant fear. I was going to get sent to Vietnam and I was going to get killed. Another fear of the military in general and the people in it. In my mind, the military was a repressive, dehumanizing organization, and the people in it were of an utterly different ilk than the Jews and Italians I grew up with in Brooklyn. Basic training. About 60 guys, most small town or rural, most Midwest or Southern, most familiar with and comfortable with guns. One other Jewish guy in the platoon. Platoon sergeant had never seen a Jew before. You guys who go to church on Friday nights, you going tonight? That was what it was. Very dehumanizing. Got punished, yelled at for the slightest little thing. Somewhere in this 8 weeks, we were given a questionnaire asking basically about skills. Can you fix cars? Can you fly a plane? Can you type? Do you know any foreign languages? I said that I could type 50 words a minute. I couldn't. But I figured that would be better than carrying a gun. End of basic training, I get assigned as a company clerk in training to an engineer battalion, Fort Hood, Texas. So I report to the outfit, go into the orderly room, that's what they call the office. And there's a bunch of guys in there. There's the clerk I'd be replacing, several assistants of his, and the first sergeant. And they're all in the process of training me. That's what they were supposed to be doing besides the work. And I found it very simple. After maybe 2-3 weeks, I had it all down, and they're very surprised how quickly I learned everything. First sergeant took a real liking, a real shine to me. I think because I learned so quickly. I think also because I was Jewish and a college graduate. There weren't very many in his probably whole history in the military. There was one other, he called me JR, short for Junior. That became my name for my entire military career. One other Jewish guy in the company, his name for his military career was Jew. Didn't seem to be any malice. Hey, Jew, a bunch of us are going out for some beers. You want to come? Times were very different. I was very surprised by how to put it, how relaxed the whole environment was. Certainly not what I expected. It was like working in a very comfortable 9-to-5, employee-friendly office job if you were a civilian. As long as you got to work on time and did your work, had the radio on, you'd chat with, a lot of people would come in because they wanted things from us, whatever they were. They'd stay and chat for a little while. The sergeants would come in and sit and sort of bullshit for a while about whatever. And I pretty quickly made friends, unlike in basic training, with both all the clerks and a bunch of other guys. And did things after work, went out, would go out for beers, go to the movies. Sometimes we drive to Austin to listen to some music in a bar. As long as you got back there, time for work the next morning, nobody cared. I learned a lot of things that I didn't know before. I learned what it was like to live on top of a mountain in the Ozarks, very little contact with the outside world. I learned what it was like, not really what it was like, but I learned about racing pickup trucks at night on two-lane blacktop country roads. I learned about a lot of guys, not patriotic in particular, didn't particularly want to kill commies, but they enlisted. Why? Because they were hoping they could get some skills that they could have a better life. I learned about real Appalachian folk music, not what I'm calling like gentrified folk music that they played in New York City in the Village, but the real deal. There was a guy there who was in rural Tennessee, terrific guitarist and singer, and I had my guitar there. And we'd sit around and swap songs, and he'd play his real deal things, and I'd play my gentrified things. And guys would sit around, and they really liked it. You know, it was very different than the whole environment I expected. I also learned that the first sergeant, besides wanting to run a really tight ship, which he wanted to do and did, he had real compassion and wanted to help out his soldiers. Personal example. One day there was a surprise inspection by the general. Clerks all stayed in the same room. Our room was a mess. We ran down, got the key, went inside the room, locked the door. General comes by. Why is this? I don't know who was showing him around, but he asked the guy, "Why is this door locked?" "I don't know, sir." "Whose room is that?" It's the clerk, sir." "Is there a key?" "Yes, sir." "Go get the key." They couldn't get the key, obviously. We had the key. General fulminates for a while, you know, saying whatever, finally moves on. Inspection's over. We sheepishly go down back to the orderly room, and one of the second lieutenants starts really chewing us out, threatening us with some administrative punishments, whatever they were. First sergeant goes over to him, puts his hand on his collar like this, shoves him against the wall, and says, "Sir, these are my clerks. If they need punishing, I'm the one who punishes them. Don't you ever talk to my clerks like that again." Second lieutenant goes away. A little later in the day, first sergeant says to us, "Hey guys, I took care of it that time. Please, please, don't ever do that again." One day, the first sergeant asks me and this guy I got pretty close to come out to his house Saturday afternoon. We go out to his house, got a big bottle of bourbon on the table. We're all drinking it, getting mildly inebriated, and he's asking us questions. What was our life like? Girlfriends, what were we going to do when we get out? He's telling us about what he wants to do when he gets out, maybe be a construction foreman. You know, he's not that far from retirement. And talking about his views on the war. He thought the war was basically a crock. There was no reason to be there, but if we were there, we should fight to win it, which he didn't think we were. And because of that, a lot of American soldiers were getting killed. And that sort of became a regular ritual. We'd go out there every couple of weeks and drink some bourbon and sort of chew the fat. And it was very nice. Then he gets promoted to be sergeant major of the whole post, working under the commanding general. And just about that same time, I'm beginning to feel, hey, I'm getting to be a short-timer. Maybe I'm getting to be safe. They won't send me over. As I start feeling that, lo and behold, I come down on a set of orders of about 200 guys, go to Vietnam. So I go out to his house, and I say, Top, anything I can do to get out of these orders, like sign up for OCS, that's Officer Candidate School, and purposely flunk out? He says, you could have done that yesterday, meaning before the orders came down. He says, I'll never forget these words. He says, JR, some guys are soldiers, some guys ain't. You can't go to Vietnam. You'd be dead in a week. He says to me, the general owes me a favor. Put in for a leave. When you come back, there's going to be orders revoking these. I put in for a leave, not really knowing what was going to happen. Come back, there's orders revoking those. Rumor around Post was that that outfit I was supposed to go over with got hit pretty hard. No one really knew, but that's what the rumor was. Okay, fast forward 20 years, 30 years, I don't remember exactly when it was. My wife and I are in D.C., and we go to the Vietnam Wall. I remembered the names of a few of the guys from my company who were on that set of orders. Every name was up on that wall. Thank you, Sergeant McClanahan. End of story.
Life certainly has a way of changing things up. And, originally, that story was called How Bourbon Saved My Life. Our next storyteller, Rick Brook, also picked up a pen when he retired. In this case, he was worked backstage in theater and broadcast industries. But, yeah, this is his first time on the other side of the lights.
This is the first time I've ever done this, and I've been in the entertainment business forever. Well, thank you. My story is of learning who I was and who I'd like to be. I'm a baby boomer. I grew up in Levittown, Long Island, which is a wasteland. Not knocking it, it was just little houses and lots of kids. That's the boomer part. We had schools that were so packed they couldn't build a new one fast enough. Essentially, the infrastructure just wasn't there. So the first elementary school was a hike. I had to take a bus and go there. They built some other schools, and then I got apportioned to another district. Now, I'm a mild-mannered child, big head, skinny little body, cute, but very sensitive, which was fine in an elementary school because I knew everybody. When you're, first grade, second grade like that, there's not a lot of problems with the children. When you get into middle school, or junior high as we called it, it's a meat grinder for young men. What happens is, essentially, it's a non-verbal communication contest where the big boys beat up the little boys. Now, what does that mean? I had no idea. I had no idea at all. Why would anybody pick on a kid who looks like a lollipop? There's no big deal. I beat him up. Well, my sister could beat him up. So I'm the new kid in town. Everybody knew everybody else because they all went to elementary school together except for me. And I didn't realize that I stuck out to the point where I had to be tested. So a large boy, much larger than me, little boys don't pick on big boys. So that's it. He comes over to me and he says, we're going to have a fight after school today. I'm thinking like, what? What? And he says, yeah, be there. Maybe I'll look for you. I say, okay. So the junior high school is here. There's a field and a parking lot, and then the senior high school is over there. So it's like a no man's land. So that's where we're going to fight. I know nothing about fighting. Nothing about fighting. So he says, okay, we're going to fight. I'm like, he knew how to fight. It's called a jab. He hits me. He's big enough. I don't even get hit so much as I remember looking up, sitting on my ass. It's like, I am furious. What just happened? And I run at him at full speed. Now, that really doesn't work on someone who knows how to box. Another jab, boom, I'm on my ass. But the third or fourth time, he says, to himself and not to me. And he came with a couple of his friends. So, oh, there'll be a fight. Let's watch the fight. Nothing to watch. So he said, okay, we're done. And I'm like, what? So I'm walking home, because the new district was a short walk home. And we're going like, I don't understand this. It's beyond my understanding. With that, I accept that, okay, I'm the new kid in town, and that's going to happen. But it really didn't happen often. You know, once you realize that hitting this kid is like, you know, it's embarrassment to even hit him. So I still had friends in elementary school, but it was a ride away. There was no bus ride there. But I had a bicycle, and I would diligently go there. And I remember one afternoon so clearly as to say that this is the crux of the story. It's a huge part of my life. It's the momentum for who I am today. And it's sort of a parable to a cartoon advertisement in the back of Popular Mechanics and things like that. It was Charles Atlas. Charles Atlas would build up your body. And the cartoon was a young man and his girl at the beach, umbrella, beach blanket. And in the background, some jocks playing or doing what they're doing. Then through the series of frames, there's maybe 7 cells total. She said, stop those guys. They're so really annoying. So he's like that little, he looks like me, you know, skinny little kid with a big head, and these guys are huge. And there's 3 of them. He said, oh, I should stop it. So the guy goes over there, and in front of his girlfriend says, you know, it doesn't pay to even hit you. You'll just never get up. You'll just blow away and just die. And with that, the girl goes, hit him. Yeah, right. Easy for you to say. So that's the revenge of a 97-pound weakling, because then he does what Charles Atlas does, and he does this. In the last frame, he's back at the beach, but now he's really big. Now he's a bully, and he beats the crap out of it. He throws a punch, and you can see in the frame the little lines they draw when you get hit hard. So it's like, okay, start out being a 97-pound weakling, build yourself up, then you could be a bully. And I'm thinking like, okay, I'm not going to do that. However, I am going to get big and strong. So at that time, there was barbells available. They were nothing like you see in a gym today. They're kind of primitive, but they work. And most people who have gymnastic equipment can't live with the guilt of not using it. So you can get a barbell set or an exercise bike. Take it away, get it out of my closet. I don't want to see it again. So I buy this, and I'm figuring out how to lift the weights. And they're heavy, but I don't know what I'm doing. So I start reading magazines about bodybuilding and this, that, and the other thing. But I'm thinking in the back of my head, they're not teaching me how to scuffle. This is not going to do. Hit a guy with the barbell. Hey, they see you coming. So in junior high school, they have different teams, and they have a wrestling team. Now, you wouldn't know it to see me right now, but my eyesight is so bad, I'm going to have to wear contact lenses. Now, just technically, I want to make this brief. 2,400. That means what I could see at 20 feet, anybody here could see at 400 feet. I can't see anything. I really can't. Can't do any ball sports, nothing along those lines. However, I can wrestle. Blind people can wrestle. It's Braille. It's all Braille. If you turn the lights off in a gymnasium in a wrestling match, a blind kid could kick the crap out of you. It's perfect. So Mr. Peterson is the coach, and he teaches. He was such a sweet man. He wanted to teach us sportsmanship. Like I gave a shit about sportsmanship. I wanted to beat people up. He didn't encourage that. So what I really found was that adrenaline is the cause of most of this mischief. That and hormones that young teenagers get, and proving things. And I'm sure the women have had the similar things as like, it's a tough place to be. But in wrestling, I'm wrestling with people that I know, and we're not really trying to hurt one another, but trying to exercise and do this and do that. And I'm not really good at wrestling. I'm a little slow and very thin, but I'm lifting the weights. And I'm doing it religiously, every day. Every day, I'm not kidding about that. Every day I lift the weights. Made no difference. Lift the weights. I look in the mirror and say, that did nothing. So after months and months and months of it, I said, you know, let me go to my mom's sewing basket and get the tape. And I'm measuring my this and I'm measuring that and my chest and my neck. And I'm seeing incremental, tiny, tiny pluses. Oh, okay, that's enough. So now I'm lifting weights every day. And I learned how to lift weights. And I'm learning how to wrestle. So I'm learning how to deal with throwing people around. Sort of working towards that goal of being good at scuffling. However, there are limitations on what you're going to learn that way. But my muscles are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And people are starting to notice. So I started, let's say 97 pounds was pretty close. 115, I'm growing taller anyway. It's not really just the weight. But when I got to be about 140 pounds, I looked muscular. Oh, cool. So now I am going crazy with the weights. At the end of my workout, I'd stop the weights, and I'd do calisthenics. I'd do 100 push-ups and 100 sit-ups, then 100 more and 100 more. I'd do 300 push-ups at the end and 300 sit-ups. And I'm learning how to wrestle, which gives me stamina. Now, because I'm a wrestler, they know who I am in school. Because he's a wrestler. People talk. It's a small school. Oh, don't mess with Rick. You don't want to mess with Brock. He knows how to wrestle. He's big and like that. So pretty much, that's the way it went. But in the back of my mind, I recall this time that I was going back to see my friends in elementary school. And I said, no, I said, it was a longer way. I'm on my bicycle, and I'm pedaling there, and I'm going down the hill, and I see one of the new kids, and his name is Don Morrow. I'll never forget Don. Don's leaning up against a log fence, split rail, and I go, okay, I'm not going to pay attention to him now because I'm going downhill. I don't want to stop the bike. But on the way back, I'm pedaling really, really, really slow, and now I'm going to go say hello to Don. So I'm pedaling over there. I get close up. He spits on me. Ooh? No. Ooh! Way more than ooh. I was like, what the fuck? He spit on me. And this is before I lifted the weights. But I remember this moment. I'm looking at him and, oh, wow. He looks like someone who is fat and doughy. In fact, his body is kind of shaped like an umpire at a baseball game with that big black thing like that. I'm going to run at him. He's going to hit me. I'm going to get knocked out. I get on my bike. I go away. So now at this point, I'm like, okay. I can deal with this. I can deal with this. So now I'm fitting in with the crowd, the high school crowd. And more than anything else, having an automobile in Levittown, you have to have an automobile. There's no place to go except within an automobile. So somebody has a car, you get into the car with them, whether you know them or not. So some of my friends knew some of Don Morrow's friends. And in this fateful evening, I'm in the back of Don Morrow's car. You may not know what a 50 Mercury looks like. I'll give a brief definition. It's huge. It's heavy. And in the back seat, it's sort of like you're in a cabin. So his car breaks down, because, young kids don't have really great cars, and cars weren't all that great to begin with back then. So we're off to the side of the road. Don is out underneath the hood of the car, and I'm sitting in the back seat. I don't really know the people in there well enough to get into a conversation. The time's going by. I'm getting really, really bored. And I can't see any out of the front window because the hood's up. So I'm looking, I'll look at the dashboard for a while. That's kind of cool, 1950s car, it's cool. And then I noticed the steering wheel. Oh, look at the steering wheel, it's beautiful. There's the speedometer. There's the horn ring. Ah, the horn ring. Huh. So there's a voice says, do it, do it. And there's another voice says, don't do it, don't do it. You gotta guess who won. So I put my hands on the seat in front of me, pull myself forward, and it's easy for me to reach, and I honked the horn, really, like, wah! And if you've ever had your head right next to a horn, it's terrifying. So he's like, whatever he's doing, I can't see it. I hear the bam, and the car sort of rocks a little bit. And he comes flying around, and he rips open the door, and he's looking at me, and he's yelling at me. And I'm like, I love this. I'm just like neutral, like, yeah. At that point, he realizes that, sorry, just don't do it again. I don't say a word. Gets back underneath the hood of the car. I'm going like, what a gift. This is a gift. Yeah, I mean, this is perfect. So now I honk the horn again. Bam! He comes running around, and at that moment, he had instant recognition of that moment when he spit on me and I was on the bikes. And he looks at me, and I'm looking at him. I'm not upset. I'm so calm. It's amazing. He just puts his head down. He goes back underneath the car, and goes, I didn't do it again. My name is Rick, R-I-C-K. Even though the P is silent, don't use it. I am not that bad a guy. However, I start to become a bully. I do. I'm not beating people up, but I know I can beat people up. So now I'm going to tell you my last fight, just to clear the air. I'm not a bad guy. The last fight I had, I was in my 20s. I weighed about 190 pounds. I was racing cars. I was in Lynbrook, which is not convenient. And we're talking about racing cars. And I'm talking to this guy, and we get into an argument. And he's huge. And unfortunately for him, he has the same position leaning on the fender of his car that Don Morrow had when he was leaning on a split rail fence. And it's coming back to me like, this guy's a dickhead. He thinks he can say anything he wants to me. Well, you know, buddy, and I went like this. And it's just because I'm getting pissed. I'm not really going to hit him. Until he says, you're not going to hit me. If you've ever seen John Wayne and Victor McLaughlin have a fight, that was the fight. I hit him so hard, literally so hard. And he was a big man. He weighed, I don't know, well over 200 pounds. Had a pack of cigarettes in his pocket. I saw the pack of cigarettes fly out of his pocket. He rolls over the hood of the car. I'm looking at the bottom of his shoe, and then he disappears. I go, oh, wow. He gets up. I go, oh, my God. That was my best shot. He gets up. So he comes around the car, and he's pissed. And I was like, well, this is great. There's not a soul around here. My friends, they ran away as soon as they saw me. As soon as they saw what was going on, I was all by myself. And he comes at me. The thing about big people, big guys like that, they don't know how to fight. For the most part, nobody wants to fight a big guy. The big guy's always just beating up a little guy. Not really much. So he comes at me, and being a wrestler, I know what to do. I throw him down on the ground, I get on his back, and I reach around, find his throat, and I'm trying to kill him by stopping him from breathing. Hey, there's no choice here. One of us is going to die. So I'm trying to do that, and I can't quite close his throat. His neck is too big. And he starts like wiggling around and going, oh man, this is like Tarzan on an elephant. What am I going to do? Go around the parking lot on his back? So I drop my grip, and I'm exhausted. I can't move my arms. So he's coming at me, and his face looked like a plate of pasta. I mean, it really messed up his face. Whatever I could try to remove, I tried. His ears, his nose, his eyeballs. It was not pretty. So he's coming at me like this. He's a mess. He goes, and I see his fist. I can't move my arms. He goes, that was it. Oh, I gotta get out of here. I head to my car. Everybody around me is from Lynbrook except me. I get my car started. I'm going, if anybody tries to stop me, I'm going to run them down with my car. End of story. You'd think so, huh? 3 weeks later, guess who comes to see me in Levittown? Parking lot for McDonald's. Got the kiosk building, and then you come in a U-turn. So you come in one way, you go around the backing out. My car happens to be near the exit. It's, for people who care about cars, it's a little white Chevrolet, bright white. That night, I happened to be wearing a turtleneck to here with cut-off sleeves. Now, my arms were huge, huge arms, 16 and a half inch, and when it's up against your muscle here and like that, you look really, really big when you're going like this. So the cars go through, and it's odd to see a station wagon filled with young men going to McDonald's and not stopping. I'm going like, this is really weird. So he leaves, then he comes back with 2 other cars. There's 3 carloads of guys. You're going like, what the fuck? What? This is ridiculous. So it's the friend that I beat up and his big brother and some cousin or something. So they surround me. So here's Jupiter and Saturn and this other guy who doesn't really want to be involved, but he walks away. So the big brother's speaking for the little brothers. Oh, you really messed him up and like this and like that. And it's like, I'm calm. You know why I'm calm? Because I wrestled and I know what it is to have adrenaline rushes. I was going to go to a faraway school. I knew it was coming up. It was on the date book. I'm in the bus. I'm going there in front of a stadium of kids that I don't know, and I'm going to wrestle. You get used to it. So I have the same calmness. It's like, yeah, I'm sorry. It was a mistake. You know, he wants to fight you again. No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't. I don't want to hurt him. I apologize. It was like the scene in Star Wars where Obi-Wan Kenobi and Luke Skywalker are talking to the 2 guards, the stormtroopers, whatever they were, and they want to see the papers. And Obi-Wan Kenobi says, you don't need to see the papers. And the one guard says, we don't need to see the papers. And Obi-Wan says, you can let us go. And he went through. They left. Nothing. And I said, like, wow, that's really power. That is really, really what I want to be. And I never had another fight. Thank you very much for listening.
Rick is working on a saga. You never know which part of it you're going to hear. But it's always entertaining. So our last speaker tonight, Deidre has certainly come further than any of us. She has come from Arkansas. And I think that, well, I do want to tell you that you should look up online Deidra'sStory.com, because she's only going to give you a piece of her amazing story. So amazing that it's going to be a motion picture soon. But I think by the time you finish hearing Deidra's story, you'll agree with me. This woman is a phoenix. She has risen from the ashes and is in glorious color. Deidra.
There's no place like home. 13 Old Greenwood Lane in Fort Smith, Arkansas was the address of our home. Now, it was not my first address. After all, I was a pastor's daughter and a pastor's wife. I had many addresses. But this address was the first one that I got to pick out the interior color of the home. I went to the local hardware store. I went through all the paint chips, and there were 4 that I thought I liked, so I got samples of each, a 4x8 sheet of plywood and some tape, taped it into quadrants, painted the 4 samples, and there was one that made my heart sing. It was called Safari Vest by a company called Bear. It was a unique color of khaki and green depending upon the light, and we painted the whole interior of the house that, and I loved it as a backdrop against the pictures that I got on sale, the curtains that I made. 13 Old Greenwood Lane was a misnomer. I don't know who named it because it was actually a circle, not a lane. It was the cutest house on the circle. But just because your house is cute, just because you have beautiful color in the home, does not mean that everything within is okay. I knew when I'd been married 3 weeks that I wanted out. But I was raised in a very ultra-conservative, women are to be submissive, cannot do anything without the permission of the authority, which is their dad or their husband. And if they do not get that permission and blessing, God will not bless them, nor will he protect them. I'd been taught this since birth. It was very important to me. And so even though I knew in 3 weeks I didn't want to be in this marriage, I knew that the problem was me and I was prideful. And I just needed to learn to submit and be the wife to this man. So I did that, raised my 7 children, home educated them, directed choirs, church pianists, taught classes, listened to heartbreaks, lots of hugs to people. But finally, after 32 years, I couldn't take it anymore. I begged him to get help. And I went and talked to someone. Deidre, if he was beating you, would you leave him? Oh, absolutely. That's wrong. You would be better off if he beat the crap out of you every day. Have you ever had one of those internal lights go on and you can see the insides, and I could see the broken bones and the bruises that weren't visible from the outside? I stayed another 1.5 years, and I brought in an interventionist and a mediator. I've never known of anybody to do that. But how do you walk away? I watched him win them over. I began to do research on abuse. We're driving down the interstate, I-40 one night, and on May 27th of 2015, he uttered one of his charming sentences to bring me back under his authority. And I snapped. And I said, "You're a son of a bitch." I don't know, he was more shocked. I had never uttered those words, but I found it quite freeing. And for the first time in 34 years of marriage, he had something on me. And he pulled over on the side of the interstate. He said, "I'm going to tell you something." I said, "You go right ahead." And he got in my face with his finger, yelling at me. And in his defense, he had never yelled at me like that, but I had never called him a son of a bitch. I got my purse, I opened the door of the Suburban, and I started walking down I-40 in the dusky evening. A car pulled over and picked me up. 2 of my sons helped me finalize what I have come to call my escape. My oldest son lived in New York and brought me here. He brought me here to start a new life. I came to New York to die. The moment I stepped out of that Suburban, I lost everything I'd ever known, including a stellar reputation. New York has a way of bringing you back to life, though. All those subway steps. Only been able to carry little bags of groceries home. And she wouldn't let me die. Eventually, I got a job at a local Starbucks, and I was an opener, and I found a place that had people for me to love. I'd loved on people my whole life and had lost it. In fact, 5 of my children decided I was too sinful for them to speak to. But I was there at 5:30 in the morning when the local neighborhood woke up and needed their caffeine, and they came in. I got to love on them. I knew the names of their children, their spouses, their drinks. After a year, my son and his wife moved with a job transfer. And I said, "I'm going to stay here. I'm alive because of you. And it's probably going to get rough, but it's time for me to stand on my own 2 feet." A friend let me rent a room really cheap for 2 months to give me more time. And I finally found a place that I could afford. It wasn't something I really wanted, and it had so little space, all I could take was a little roller suitcase in my purse. So a couple of my friends took my little extra clothes, and I'd had a few things by this time. I got in a taxi and I gave the new address, 90 Lafayette Street. All I had was a bunk bed, and it was a room of 30 women. There were 15 sets of bunk beds in this homeless shelter. I didn't know if I was going to survive the humiliation. One day at Starbucks, I was wiping off tables, and a customer said, "Deetra, do you live in the area?" And I said, "Well, I lived in Carroll Gardens with my son and his wife for a year. Where do you live now?" I was not prepared with an answer. And so I gave the honest answer. I said, "Well, I live in a homeless shelter." "You do not." "Well, actually, I do." She said, "Can my husband and I meet with you tomorrow when you get off work?" They came in almost every day, two of my favorites. I said, "Sure." Sure enough, they were waiting on me. We sit down, and he said, "Deetra, can I ask questions?" I said, "Listen, I don't go around telling this, but ask what you want." So he asked financial questions. He asked personal questions. When he was finished, he said, "Deetra, we just know you as our barista, but we love you, and we cannot imagine what you're going through. For the next 6 months, we want to give you this many hundreds of dollars a month. We want to invest in you, and we don't ever want to be paid back." Their generosity changed my life. 518 West 134th became my new address. I went from a bunk bed to a whole room that was mine. I rented the room for 2.5 years, and I worked 4 jobs 7 days a week. I got up at 2 in the morning, started walking at 3 in the morning to get to the A train, to get to Starbucks in Brooklyn. I kept dogs one weekend, didn't do that again. I worked at a temporary tattoo store. I was an afternoon nanny. I sold jeans. I was a host at a restaurant. Put out my resume. Nobody would interview me, I guess, because I was 54 at the time. They think I'm about ready to retire. I had nothing. So I think I'm going to tell my Starbucks customers I'm looking for a full-time job. One of my favorites who brings in his computer gives me his business card and said, "Send me your resume." I started interviewing. I didn't know where he worked or what he did, but they called me. And they created a position called the HR assistant, and they taught me the computer. I had benefits. I had a full-time job, which meant 556 West 141st became my address. This time, I have a whole 1-bedroom apartment. I moved in with a twin bed I bought when I got out of the shelter and 2 dressers. Friends began to send me things, and I was happy. One day, I get a message from a volunteer in the homeless shelter. By this time, I had been out 5 years. She said, "Deetra, have you ever heard of Humans of New York?" And I said, "Yeah, I've read some of the stories. They're wonderful." I just got through talking with Brandon, the author and publisher. He may be interested in featuring you. Would you be up for that? I didn't know what was involved. I said, "Sure." He contacted me. He comes over. He said, "I can do a 1-page story. I do a whole series." We talked about 15 minutes, and he said, "It's the most remarkable story I've ever heard." So on June 9th last year, 15 chapters of my story went all over the world. The last chapter, he said, "Deetra has worked hard her whole life and never been paid. Let's help her retire." From every corner of the globe, $5, $25, $100, $5,000 came with messages and cheers until over $600,000. I have no Social Security. I didn't ask for anything in the divorce. I had nothing, so I knew I needed to invest the money. I quit my job July 15th of last year. I put some in stocks, but there was a missing element in my life. 33 Willow Trail in Putnam County became my new address, and I moved in April 6th. A whole home, a yard. Since the world gave me the money, I did a video to thank them. I gave them a tour of the house, and the messages began to come from everywhere. Dietra, do a wish list. We want to furnish your dream home. Between the wish list and my friends, over 150 gifts, rugs, lamps, blenders, a new mattress, fresh sheets. My personal favorite is a chainsaw. I had to promise not to use it personally, but I feel badass, I'll tell you. But I had to go to the local paint store. I didn't need to look through all the samples. I went to Bear, Safari Vest. I said, can I have a sample of this, please? After all, 2010 and 13 Old Greenwood Lane have been a long time. My heart has been through much. Cheap paintbrush and I go, put that on the wall. Oh, still makes my heart happy. The whole bottom of the house is Safari Vest. I don't know if the neighborhood would agree, but I think 33 Willow Trail is the most beautiful house on the street. I've never been so happy, and I'm free. Because after all, there's no place like home.
And with that, I wish you a story-worthy week. Good night.